So for more reaction, joining me right now, we have Michael Hardaway, former communications director to Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and Maura Gillespie, former advisor to John Boehner and Adam Kinzinger. Welcome to you both. Michael, the administration keeps trying to spin Trump's tariff moves, but are Americans buying it? Are these new exemptions seen as giving into pressure?
No, they're trying to gaslight us into believing that he didn't surrender in this trade war. And here's the other thing we should think about. The war for consumers hasn't actually started, because the war happens when people go to Walmart and Target and Amazon, and everything they like to buy is 40% more. So those things really haven't kicked in. And so that's when it begins, and that's when the pressure rises on Republicans and Donald Trump to do something when the prices of average goods rise. And so from my perspective, as we look at what's happening here, 75% of the things we buy from Walmart come from China in some capacity. 70% of the things we buy from Amazon are sourced from China in some capacity. And so that means when those prices rise, people will angrily call their congressman and say, get Trump on the line and fix this. That's when the trade war starts. I'm
curious, Maura, do you agree with what Michael's saying? Are Republicans going to feel the squeeze?
They may come to midterms, but that's to be seen. I think right now the largest issue at hand is the fact that the White House really fumbled on the messaging aspect of this and the rollout. It was very chaotic, very back and forth. And one thing that the business world can't really tolerate is the inconsistencies, right? They have to plan for that. They have to plan for volatility and to, mitigate the risks that are likely to drive up costs, because they have to plan for if these tariffs do actually go into effect. And so I think that having some of these chaos agents, the White House, there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. If the president's plan itself had just rolled out with more diplomacy at the forefront and targeting China for the fact that China does steal our intellectual property, right? You talk about things on Amazon. Small businesses here in America will create something, sell something on Amazon, and Chinese actors will steal it, take it, and sell it for cheaper. We need a way to push back on that. And so the idea about pushing back on China, about having fair trade policies around the world, having manufacturing brought home on certain products and things of that nature to make more Americans buy American-made products, those are all pretty sound objectives, right? But it was the rollout that I think was the biggest mistake. And again, it's a matter of whether these short-term pains will be able to actually accumulate those long-term gains as the president's promised, and if Republicans can withstand that kind of pressure from their constituents.
But Maura, you make a point, you're saying too many cooks in the kitchen. I want to know, are they all making the same dish?
It doesn't seem like they are. I mean, you have Scott Bessent, who seems to be, I guess, the steady hand here, who's trying to say, whoa, 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 let's pull this back a little bit. But then you have Peter Navarro and Stephen Miller going out on camera and espousing different things. So I do think as though there is a real concern of messaging, and the White House needs to get their ducks in a row, and they've been inconsistent, even from the White House press secretary 1 hour saying one thing and then the president says another. I do think that inconsistency isn't helping their efforts. And again, the idea around what they've tried to do is something that most Americans would agree that we need to do these things, but the way they went about it was, I think, very chaotic and potentially damaging to our relationships around the world.
Yeah. Michael, is there an off-ramp? Do you see one here?
No, I think he's got to be reasonable. Look, we do need a global trade deal in some way that neutralizes many of the trade issues that we have with China. But we had one. It was called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was negotiated by President Barack Obama, and Donald Trump withdrew from that deal. And that deal would have neutralized so many of the trade advantages that China currently has, that Donald Trump currently complains about.
And joining me now is former chief economist and economic policy advisor to Vice President Biden, and former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and really the guy I trust to ask these questions most of all, Jared Bernstein. Thank you so much. So, Jared, we have Trump's 145% tariff on goods from China, and it was going to take a toll on tech companies. So why do you think this exemption is happening now?
Well, I think it's because the Trump administration is slowly waking up to the reality of some of their actions and their impacts. We saw that in the stock market, of course, but their pain threshold for taking trillions of dollars of wealth losses in the stock market was pretty high. But once it hit the bond market later in the week, that actually risks financial problems throughout the globe. We have a global financial system where U.S. debt is really at the heart of that. And when that gets threatened, you worry about a really serious breaking of the system. And so that led them to take down the reciprocal tariffs. Now they started getting a whiff of reality from the tech companies, Apple in particular, and they've backed down here as well. I actually think it's a good sign. This breaking news is good breaking news. We need more of the same. It is kind of getting back to the way we were before, but that's kind of a sideshow at this point.
Can we also add that tariffs made consumer confidence take quite the nosedive? I mean, take a look at these two headlines, Jared. From anxious to petrified, consumer sentiment plunges further. And then there's this one. As tariffs hit, Americans are racing to buy car seats, iPhones, and Christmas gifts. I mean, Jared, it's been 10 days, right, since Trump's Liberation Day. Even with the new exemptions, how might things look 10 days from now?
It's a really important point because, you know, we're talking about smartphones, computers, semiconductors, all exempted in this new executive order. But they still face a 20% tariff. That base is still in there. It's 10% for all other countries, but it's 20% for China. So consumers have really understood that tariffs mean higher prices for them. We couldn't see that more clearly in the kind of sentiment surveys you were just showing. And consumers have had years of being stressed out by higher prices. There were a lot of voters out there who voted for Trump to lower prices. He comes in and he raises prices. Clearly, that's gotten under a lot of people's skin. Then it hit the markets. Then you saw some of his billionaire supporters getting nervous. So really, it's very hard to find anyone who isn't paid to think otherwise who's supportive of this program. And as I said in my first comment, this reality seems to be slipping back into the administration's actions.
You know, and on the heels of what you've just said in that answer, the White House characterized Wednesday's 90-day suspension as part of President Trump's grand negotiating strategy. But there are reports he backed down after the massive disruptions to, you mentioned, the bond market, with Trump saying people were getting queasy and yippy about bonds. Explain why bonds, why this may have been the reason that Trump changed course.
This country is carrying a debt level of close to 100% of GDP, and that's $30 trillion. Okay? So if you have the interest rate that you have to service on that debt go up by 1 percentage point, that's $300 billion of new debt service. Okay? That's real money. Secondly, we saw something really alarming. It's kind of under the hood. It's sort of the plumbing of the market in this bond route. We saw the safe haven status of U.S. sovereign debt, of U.S. debt, the kind of debt that, as I said earlier, is a foundation for global financial markets, come under threat. Investors were saying, I'm not sure the U.S. is the safe haven I thought it was. I'm going to take my credit over to Germany. And that kind of a threat is something that's really hard to recover from. So I think when the administration, and especially Scott,
the Chinese economy is actually less and less dependent on American exports. In 2018, when the first trade war started, about 20% of China's exports went to the U.S. Now it's less than 13%. The U.S., by contrast, is dependent not just on Chinese manufactured exports, but also all of those ingredients or semi-manufactured or raw materials that go into things that we manufacture here or elsewhere. Not to mention our farmers are harmed. So I think ultimately Xi Jinping is in a much stronger place than even he was 5 or 6 years ago to wade this trade war out. But let me leave you with one positive thing, Alex, and that is you can imagine a positive scenario here where the United States negotiates very quickly with our friends and allies, gets off the ledge of this trade war, and then jointly with the Europeans, with the Japanese, with the Koreans, with the Indians, we say to China, look, you have been unfair in the world trading system. You're stealing our IP. You have unfair subsidies. Let's all work together to make the system more fair. That is the most positive scenario I can envision. I hope it's likely.
Yeah, absolutely. But I have to take a look at these two graphics that I saw, which really put into effect what you've been saying. It's a significant shift in global trade since 2000, when the U.S. was the largest trade partner for most countries worldwide. 2024 calculations measured huge growth in the shift toward China. I mean, how can the U.S. address an export-focused economy like China's?
Yeah, this is a really important chart because while we in the United States are becoming more and more protectionist, frankly, both on the far right and on the far left, China continues to trade and to export. And so they are the largest trading partner of, I think, something like 130 countries around the world, which is what your chart shows. That doesn't mean they're trading fairly with all those countries. And a lot of countries that are not the United States have grievances with the Chinese. So what I outlined in my wishful thinking scenario is something that would really help not just the US, but all of those other trading partners of China.
Okay. How hopeful are you, just in a quick 15 seconds, that things are going to just calm down and, as you say, return to sane proportions?
Hope springs eternal. I mean, we have seen the ball bouncing like crazy. The volatility has been extreme. You all have been reporting on it.
Oh, yeah.
I would say to all of your viewers and American businesses out there, watch the trajectory of the ball versus where it's bouncing. And I think the trajectory is higher tariffs all around, tougher to do business with the Chinese in China, probably retaliation against individual U.S. companies. But I would imagine not total decoupling.
Sounds good.
All of Trump's rivals with the tariffs are winning tonight. Yes, it's China, it's primarily, but guys, this is what Canada wanted the world to see. Three things about Trump. One, he was going to do it to everybody. It wasn't just going to be targeted very precisely like a scalpel. It was going to happen to everybody. Sure, it started with Canada and Mexico, but we all knew, even if the rest of the world, almost the rest of the world didn't seem to believe it. And if you look at the global stock markets, they didn't believe it was going to happen because the stocks only collapsed once it did, right? We saw this, right? We only saw that major collapse once it did go global. If the markets knew it was going to happen, it would have been baked in, gradually over the last couple months. We would have saw a gradual decline most days, but the markets remained high until it happened, right? So the rest of the world learned that. Two, they also learned that when you stand up to a bully, the bully backs down, at least partially. And you saw Trump do that with the back down with the rest of the world. But now he's also saying, well, I'm going to exempt certain things like computers and certain electronics, which is a pretty big friggin' exemption. Because he sees all the tariffs coming and people might not get their Nintendos and whatnot. And it's insane stuff. And now he's scrambling. And also what really matters here, the third point that's really critical, is that if you stand together, you can beat Trump. So the bully will back down if you stand tall. The bully was not going to stop with one or two or three countries. And when it's the world uniting, because right now the American establishment is terrified that all Trump is a chump. Yeah, all Trump has achieved is making China look like the world leader. America's not the leader of the world right now. They're not. Not right now. Not right now. Right now on trade, it's China. And Trump, it's that he did that.